Welcome to the audio commentary of Timeless. My name is Alexander Tuschinski, I'm the film's director, and in the following 108 minutes, I want to tell you more about how we made the film, what the ideas behind it were, and a lot of unsaid anecdotes. The opening you're seeing here right now with Helmut Berger was actually a late addition during the post-production phase of the film. This is a different take than the one with Helmut Berger used later in the film, and I liked his line, "Art should influence society." The film was originally supposed to start with this shot right here. But then I figured it's way more interesting to make art should influence society a reoccurring motive, and I did like this beginning with the heartbeat, so it was very spontaneous. And spontaneous, I think that's a good keyword on my approach to creating films and on this film in general. There was a screenplay for the film. I wrote it between 2013 and 2014 when we were starting filming the film, but then on set and during post-production I like to use a lot of inspiration of the moment to create new scenes and to create new lines, to create new moments that are just better than what's written, because I think in the production phase you get a lot of spontaneity. And this sequence right here, the interrogation scene, was a very spontaneous scene. Maybe a little bit about the background. The bad cop here, Rick Shapiro, is a friend of mine from Los Angeles. He's a very good stage comedian who does long stream of consciousness monologues, and he has appeared in film and television also. And the other actor who just left is my good friend Lennix, who's a very serious actor. He has been a great Shakespearean performer, and I thought the contrast of the two in this scene will make it a lot of fun. And in this sequence, we improvised a lot from many camera angles, and I had a lot of footage to work with. Basically, Rick Shapiro knew the screenplay, and we started by kind of sticking to the script, but then we all encouraged him to improvise more and more and more, and take by take by take, it went more and more wild. And I think one take ran about 20 minutes because it got more and more absurd, and I wouldn't yell cut because I just liked what was going on. Editing this sequence was a huge challenge. I always do the editing of my films myself because while writing I already have strong ideas about the visuals of the film, and editing to me is a lot of joy, and it's the stage that gives the film its definite style, so to say. Because you will see, and you probably already saw the film, so you know that the film has lots of moments with very, let's say, unconventional editing. That's exactly how I want my films to look like. And editing this sequence was a huge challenge because there was so much raw material, and just to make it a continuous flowing scene that's not over long was more challenging than the other scenes, because this strayed a little bit from the screenplay during filming. How do I say a little bit? This strayed a lot from the screenplay. With other sequences, they stick to the script, let's say 80%, but this one went really wild. And here's one of my favorite moments when Rick keeps shouting about a piece of shit tear with so much aggression, you know. And so in this sequence it was more free-flowing. And basically, I met a lot of American actors after I did my first film, Menschenliebe, and my second feature film, Breakup, which I screened in the United States, and it's film festivals. I met Miles Hunter here, I met Rick through him, and I met Lennix, who's about to re-enter the frame. And I thought to myself, I would like to make a film with my American friends. That's basically the starting point for writing Timeless. It was, I want to make a film with some TV scenes of American actors. Because I usually do my films in Germany with German actors, a lot of friends and a lot of first-time actors with a relatively low budget, so to integrate American actors into the film, I thought, I could have everybody try speaking English, but it would be strange, German actors speaking English in a story. So I thought, let's make the film in German, but some scenes should be in English with my American friends. And that's how the structure came about. And I do collect 1930s sound recordings. That's why I had the idea to make the soundtrack of the film a lot of vintage music. And then the scenario idea came up. Let's make it vintage. I don't really have the budget to do a period piece set in the 1930s. or 1920s. So let's make it contemporary with a time travel story. And then I wrote the screenplay quite quickly, and I'm going to tell you more about the individual scenes as they are playing. So this opening scene, I had already filmed scenes in this white studio in my film Break Up. The ending scene in particular is very reminiscent of this scene. We have three people sitting there and interacting. So I thought the opening sequence should be something more abstract, something like a thriller almost. So we don't really know what the film coming up is going to be. And that's my idea with Timeless, that the film really has no genre. It is a satire, it is a comedy. I mean, most parts of it are a comedy, but you cannot really predict what is going to happen next. And that's my idea of filmmaking. At least for this film and the films I made so far, I want to make them really unpredictable, not put them into any conventional category. I have ideas for more conventional films also, but these films are all very wild. And we filmed this scene with 2 cameras, by the way. I'm going to talk more about our collaboration later, but this scene you're seeing right now, Konstantin switching off the TV. In the screenplay, that was much longer, and before filming, I already shortened it because I thought it's too long. Originally, Konstantin would stand up, then grab the suitcase with the gun, and then walk outside on the street, and we see his silhouette walking, and it would be very strange, and a French revolutionary melody play, Ça ira, which blends into him standing on a stage talking about 1932, a revolutionary story he wrote with the title 1932, which turns into the film. But I like to make it much more compact, and this is Sebastian's first appearance. Sebastian and I have been collaborating on films since my very, very first few shorts when I was in school. We went to the same school in Germany, and since then we've been friends, and he has been in my films, and he has wonderful comedic talent. In most of my films he plays a character called Arnold Richter, which is actually more of an inside joke. It started out like that, because my very first film, Menschenliebe, his character is called Arnold Richter, and then I thought let's make him Arnold in every film, but actually it connects them very much. So Timeless, to me, is a direct continuation of Menschenliebe, my first film, both dealing with similar topics in a very different fashion. And here is Jenny's first appearance. She also appeared in Break Up, and this is actually one of the very first scenes we filmed after the American actors left. So the first scenes we filmed were actually the interrogation, then the American World War II scene, and the American sitcom scene, all in one block. My American friends were visiting in Europe, and we decided to film the scenes, and it was a very quick process. And actually we filmed these American scenes in about 4 days or so. It was very, very compact, and afterwards everybody was exhausted, and then we started doing the German scenes of the film. So the filming actually started with these few American sequences. I'm going to tell more about them. The interrogation was the very first scene we filmed actually. And then the interrogation and all that was in about June 2014. And then in September or August 2014, we started filming the German scenes, and this one was the first. And I filmed it from lots of camera angles to make it more interesting. And here's one effect I wrote in the screenplay. I often dislike long expositions, when people tell us something that's necessary for the story. So here he has to convince her that he's really a time traveler, and all his explanation, that would be boring, so it's fast forwarded. On the set we made a lot of funny improvisations of what he would tell her. He told her very funny, very unconvincing stories, and she went, "Oh yes, you're really a time traveler," because of course we already knew that it would be fast forwarded. And you probably already saw that the cinematography of the film is not really, let's say, conventional. I'm very inspired by 1960s cinema, 1960s, 1970s. And the cinematographer Matthias Kirste and we have always collaborated. Since my first feature film, Menschenliebe, we have the exact same visual taste. And in my previous films, our collaboration used to be that he's filming the scenes where I'm acting, and when I'm not acting, I'm filming them myself. for Timeless, in most scenes, not in this one, this was filmed with one camera, but in most scenes we actually had two cameras. Matthias and I collaborated with these cameras, and he was always standing a bit in front of me with his display, and I gave him a general idea what shots we should get, and I would stand behind him and I would try to film the things that he wouldn't film with his camera. So he, for example, filmed the total view and I filmed the close-up, and it was a very beautiful collaboration. And this opening with the photos on the smartphone, I don't know how I had the idea for it. Or maybe I do know, yes. I was talking to a girl and she talked about her friends, and instead of just talking, she showed me all kinds of selfies on her smartphone with her friends. And I found it so funny, I thought, let's make this the film's opening, that the girl is showing him all these photos. And in this sequence, actually, we see a few actors. That's Tony Redford, who has acted in a lot of my films. Klaus Müller, who has assisted me most of my films, is the guy standing there watching the video of the Mutant Calculator. He actually played the calculator in Mutant Calculator, a music video I did in 2011. And the annoyed guy to the right, which you're about to see, he is Maximilian Lorenz, who played a quite large part in this film. He appears in most of the scenes and he has his own separate journey as a character. And all of these scenes, they're more like slapstick scenes in the opening. I wanted to give the film a very 1920s slapstick feeling. I do love the films of Laurel and Hardy, Buster Keaton and all that, so I did like to give the idea of this period feeling to the beginning of the film. And actually, when I'm in Los Angeles, I have many friends who are film historians, like, for example, Miles Kruger, who also appears in the making-of documentary of this film, and we watch lots of old films. And when I was actually younger, I spent some time in Paris, always going to the Cinémathèque Française, trying to watch as many old films as I could, to get as much inspiration as I could when I decided that I wanted to do more films. So I have a very strong affinity for older films. And here you can see Matthias and me, that's the cinematographers, and I do like visual gags in my film. And you will see throughout the film there are lots of visual gags, quick cuts and all that. And I do like to break up more serious scenes with more funny scenes, as you'll also see. And this opening, it was me with the camera and the two of them, and we had this very free feeling, just joking around. And it was just very wonderful. And here you're about to see a very quick montage of the way I like. When we go filming, I often film lots of details, and I like to intercut them to give the whole scene a different rhythm. And now we get to the right wing and left wing and cult people scenes. I wanted to make this guy from 1932 really go through some very extreme scenarios together with a hipster girl who has no idea what's going on. And we filmed this in an old factory that was about to be renovated in February 2015, and it was actually very, very cold the day we were filming this sequence, and we had some electric heaters set up to give us heat during the pauses, but we couldn't have them run during filming because they made a lot of noise. And this intercut is actually from a different building, so it was all at different times of the year. It's very interesting what you can do with montage, but this sequence in this room, it was basically very, very cold. And Jenny, in her light dress, I felt very sorry for her. In between takes, she would stand directly in front of the heater, and then she would have to go outside again because they entered the room and it was so cold. And in the film, you don't notice it at all, which is very funny to me. And here he sees them walking up. My direction to Jenny was always, look more naive. And he basically has no idea what's going on. And doing this and the left wing scene was a big challenge because we did them both on one day, because the people playing in the right wing scene are also playing in the left wing scene, and we had to transfer from one location to the next. And I had to get a lot of props for these scenes. So this record player, for example, I bought at a second-hand store and I restored it to running order just to be in this sequence. And it was very fun to record the singing because, you know, the people there, everybody had their own take. One would stand there with tears in his eyes while singing. We would think his character should be crying, the other one would think his character should be strong. And then I'm breaking up this mood with them walking in there. It's a little bit of an homage to the film Dropout of my friend Tinto Brass. It's a very faint homage and you barely would recognize it, but in Dropout, the main protagonists are actually, in the beginning, walking into some meeting of some people discussing things, and then it gets broken up by the police. So I thought, let's make it similar to that. And these people here, Maximilian again. You see, that's Maximilian again, who was in the train. He was the annoyed train passenger. The leader of these right-wing people is played by Dirk Helbig, who is a theater actor from Stuttgart, Germany, where I live, and he's a great actor. And most of the other people here, they had never acted before. They are friends of mine who are interested in the film. There are a few acting students, like Nora and Björn there. But all the others just wanted to give acting a try. And I do like to do films with first-time actors. And I always do a lot of rehearsals. Because I find if someone has not really acted a lot, they might have a really difficult time in the beginning, remembering their lines, and they might sound not natural. So if we rehearse the scene for 1 or 2 hours, they become very natural and make the words their own words. Oh, here they have this slapstick escape again. But basically, I don't insist on people saying the lines 100% as they are in the screenplay, as long as they get the meaning across and they're convincing for the character. And very often you get surprised about little details that actors come up on set that make the scenes more spontaneous. And I usually film scenes from beginning to end. So I always do the master shot, which shows the whole sequence, maybe 2 or 3 takes, just to have the scene from beginning to end. And then I get into the close-ups. So if time wouldn't suffice, that's David, by the way. He'll play a big part in the later film, and here he's already foreshadowed. He will join Konstantin and his gang later on, and very few people notice him. David is actually Jenny's brother, so he's the brother of Jenny, the actress, who's walking there with Sebastian. And I just liked him and I wanted to put him in the film. And now we get to the left-wing scene. And in the opening, I had them improvise a lot of dialogue, also to help them get into character. And we had a lot of hilarious moments. And I actually had to cut out much of it for pacing reasons. But all of this that you're seeing right now was improvised up until the people walking in. And you see this sequence, the cinematography is more documentary-like, shaky camera kind of, the lighting is not as sophisticated, which was my idea to give it a contrast from the right-wing scene. In the right-wing scene, you had the camera being very precise, the lighting very precise, while the left-wing scene, it's more free-flowing. So I wanted to give the scenes a different visual style, and both scenes I did the cinematography in. And you will see with the scenes that Matthias does the cinematography in, there's not really a difference because we both have the same visual ideas, visual style. And Matthias really has been one of my closest friends for many years. I hope to make many more films with him. And I told the people to bring their own costumes to the left-wing scene, and they did. And everybody had their own interpretation, except for Björn here. I wanted him to wear this T-shirt that actually one actor in my first film, Menschenliebe, was also wearing in the beginning. So I remember he brought some very nice costume and I told him, oh, let's try the T-shirt underneath the jacket, because I do like to put a lot of homages for my former films into my more current ones. And I remember when we set up the sets to make them more moody, putting these newspapers onto the windows in this scene and the one before. And this short moment when he, put this scarf in front of his face, that was an improvisation. I just noticed how he did it and I found it funny and I thought, let's do a close-up of that. And yeah, this scene, we actually improvised the ending also. I had the idea, I think, when all the police officers are pushed out there. This is another improvised moment. It looks very brutal, but he didn't even touch him with his shoe, And then they thought, let's give the scene an ending after chasing out the cops. So we did this thing of everybody going back to their starting position. And the scene we're about to see with Silva Meshi, the guru, is actually a direct homage to my film Breakup, where he also appeared. In Breakup, this DVD that he produced is seen, and the content of the DVD is seen, and now we see more of a behind-the-scenes look at Silvermeshi. The actor playing Silvermeshi is Philip, who will also play Chancellor Schmidt, and I just love him in that role, with all this stuff on the walls that I designed and printed out. It was great fun. This girl is Barbara, who's also playing later in the film. She's Gudrun there, and I do like to give some actors different characters in the film. I do like this surrealistic comedic effect. The actor playing Silvermesh's cinematographer here, that's Niels, one of my close friends for many, many years. I knew him even before I did films, and he always assists me during films, so I give him small roles. And one of the police officers there is again Klaus Müller, who played in Mutant Calculator and who's my good friend. He's the one to the right of Sebastian's character. You see the one in the middle. And actually the scene was supposed to end again, with people beating each other up. But then on the day of filming, I thought, let's give them guns. And we still had a lot of prop guns from other scenes, so we made it more extreme, and I like how scenes can develop. This scene here we filmed a few months before, in September 2014, and the cinematography, you see, from a total view, it zooms and pans to a close-up, and that's the style of cinematography I like. And now this upcoming scene here, with Konstantin, played by me, being first introduced. In the screenplay, it was a 3-page long dialogue, and I struggled all the time. How should I film this to make it interesting? Them explaining how time travel might work and all that. And I thought, should they sit somewhere? Should they walk? But it's boring, and the beginning of the film is such a high speed. Then, before filming this in September 2015, I always postponed that scene because I thought I must find a way to make it interesting. I had the idea, let's have them smash a car. And a friend of mine, who's actually playing the driver, Michael, later on, introduced me to some friends of mine, Team Altblech in Calw, who had this old Mercedes that it looks quite good, but it was apparently severely damaged. The engine was beyond repair, and they made it look a little bit better for the screen. It was really damaged. So they gave me that Mercedes, and we filmed with it. And beating up that car was actually very difficult, because you see, we have a lot of camera angles, and you cannot repeat any take here. And I never do storyboards. I sometimes plan some scenes in my head before filming, but basically I like to be very spontaneous, so I had to keep in mind, we now need a total view of the car in the beginning. We smash the windshield until when he smashes a side window. Then we have to put the cameras in a different position. Matthias was operating one camera, and one camera was standing on a tripod for static shots. So there was a lot of concentration going on, and you see, it worked very well. We have no continuity problem, but it's actually much better to watch than it was to film it, because during filming there was all this concentration going on. And you see, sawing the roof and then burning the car, we wanted to go wild. And I think everybody had great fun, but I was very concentrated, so I was more, let's make sure the window doesn't get broken too early and so on. But for everybody else, I think it was just pure fun to do this. And Konstantin's apartment, I'm going to say a few things, but just the previous scene, actually, the way I wrote it, this group of people walks across a street, along a street, and then they discover this Mercedes, and then they beat it up to make an example. And it's actually a deleted scene, but I noticed it took out a lot of the pacing of the film, so it now just starts with them smashing the Mercedes without any context. So this sequence here, in my first version of the screenplay, Konstantin was actually a very poor guy living in a really run-down old apartment. And I changed it a lot because I wanted to give him a different feeling of freedom. I wanted to make him someone who just barely survives in the first version of the script, living in an old house and going by elevator in a 1940s, 1930s elevator into this really rundown apartment. And in the first version of the script, actually in the art performance scene that's coming later, when in the ending everybody is arguing, Konstantin was supposed to put a lot of things from the buffet, a lot of the food into his pockets to save for later. So I changed this approach. And this long rant, this long monologue was mostly improvised by me. I wrote a novel called Fetzenleben, which is very stream of consciousness, and I did a lot of readings from that novel to my friends in Germany. So when I did this monologue, I just improvised based on the monologues from the novel. So it's actually very coherent, very very dense, with lots of thoughts, which were all very recent in my head from writing the novel. These drawings are by me, and we see a lot of pictures of screenplays and posters of my own films in this. And Matthias was doing the cinematography, and Jenny was assisting during that day, and Sebastian was sitting there, and they all know me for many years. So while filming, they said more and more things to get me in the mood for that scene. And it was very funny. And the takes went more and more absurd. And I think I also learned a little bit from observing Rick Shapiro on set about the way he goes on his stream of consciousness monologues and rants. And that's Konstantin's cat, but never appearing again in the film. I just found it interesting to give this effect. In all of my films, I have a lot of shots of animals. One of my first films I did when I was 18 or 19 was called Killer Squirrels. A very silly comedy about squirrels attacking people. And since then, I put lots of shots of animals into my films because I like animals, and it's just kind of become a reoccurring motive for me. The scene that's coming up now was actually one of the very first scenes I wrote for Timeless. I didn't even know that the film would be called Timeless then, or that I would integrate it really into my next screenplay. I listened to the sound recording you're about to hear, and I somehow had the idea, let's make this a story of Konstantin's many seductions, of Konstantin seducing a lot of women, I mean. But before that, maybe one more comment to this sequence we are watching now. I always film with a very small team. So here it was Jenny holding the microphone, Matthias operating the camera. We put some lights here to make the lighting look better than just natural light, because natural light in this scene was difficult. There was light coming through the windows, but from the right there was no light. And I always try to produce the films from the smallest scene to the biggest, just because I find it best to organize. You do scenes with one or two actors, and you just need the cinematographer and the sound person. If I'm doing the cinematography myself in that scene, I just need the actors. And then we get successively bigger and bigger. This was not so much the case with Timeless, because we started with the scenes with the Americans, then we did a few small scenes, then we did the right-wing, left-wing scenes, then this scene came up in summer or spring 2015 and all that. But I do like to have a small crew, because the budgets of my film are not that high. Here, that's a poster of Killer Squirrels, Menschenliebe, Breakup, The Critic, another film I did. And these are actually sketches I made when I was younger for films, so this is all stuff I have. But yes, I do like to have a smaller crew, because my films so far have not had huge budgets, so I do like to put all the budget in front of the screen and have a crew that's very small, sound person, cinematographer usually. And with some bigger scenes we had to do a little more, like catering and so on, but usually behind the camera there's just two people, and if I'm the cinematographer in that scene, it's basically I'm one of the two people behind it. So the upcoming scene now, that was, as I said, one of the first, or the very first one I wrote, and the character of Konstantin also appears in my first film, Menschenliebe. There's Konstantin and Arnold, and as I said, Timeless is kind of like a successor to Menschenliebe. So I thought, let's make a scene of Konstantin's adventures, and there's another film I want to make called Revolution, which I wrote in 2010, right after filming Menschenliebe, which would form a trilogy with Timeless and Menschenliebe, but I'm not certain yet about the order, because the chronological order would be Menschenliebe, Timeless, Revolution, because Revolution would be the last one I filmed, but actually on the order I wrote, it would be Menschenliebe, Revolution, Timeless. But they work very well together. There are more variations on a theme. So it's always Konstantin a seducer, but in Timeless he's a different one than in Menschenliebe. And Arnold in Menschenliebe is a student from the present day, while here he's a guy from 1932. So it's always different but similar, and the characters are called the same, but they're at the same time different. And this sequence, actually, I observe a lot of people having small talk, and I noticed that with quite a few people, it's always about not very interesting topics, and thought how to get to know someone. And Konstantin's tagline, or not tagline, Konstantin's trademark line, so to say, in Menschenliebe is "you're different, you're special," telling girls this without any context. So I figured let him do some really tedious small talk and then just say, "Oh, you're so different." And that was the idea. And the photographer you see here is called Robert Eichen. He's a very good friend of mine. He visited me in Germany in December 2014. You know, he visited Europe, so he stopped by at my place. And I showed him a lot of shots of Timeless that I had done until that time, and he thought, hey, I want to be in this film somehow. So I had no scenes filming during the days that he was there in December. So I just had the idea, let's make you a photographer. Let's dress you in this military jacket I had left over from the World War II sequence. Give you this old camera I have lying around. And I'll see how I can edit it into the film. And then when I filmed this sequence we're seeing now, this was done in March 2015, during editing I thought it would be fun to have Bob stand there and just do photos of everybody. And it works beautifully. People sometimes ask me, why is he there? What's his role? And he's just a more or less funny element that's a little bit random. But Konstantin, after this sequence, actually mentions to Arnold, hey, do you want to see some photos? So I kind of integrated that into the film. And you see the scaffolding in front of the building. The building is called Manufaktur Ziegenbein, and the owner, Felix Ziegenbein, is a good friend of mine, and he was very generous letting us film there. But when we were filming there was some building work going on, some renovation going on, so there was a scaffolding in front of it. And I thought it doesn't matter, we'll make it part of the storyline. So in the scene with the car, Jenny's character asks Konstantin, are you still renovating? And he says, no, the scaffolding is gone. Which makes sense since this is a flashback. And you see these scenes, this was all very spontaneous. In the screenplay, I think I wrote they're running away or they're chasing Konstantin and he somehow escapes. And during filming, a lot of these shots were just very, very spontaneous ideas I had to give this more of a slapstick feeling, to make the scene more fun. And when we were filming this shot, it was very, very cold and windy. It was spring 2015 in Germany, but it was so cold, there was a lot of wind, and I'm surprised that the microphone didn't really pick up that wind. And when we were standing there so awkward, we were very much freezing. And during this sequence, Matthias couldn't make time on a very short notice because I decided to film it because some actresses had time, so I said we should film it this weekend. Matthias couldn't take time off his schedule because it was on such a short notice, so Tanja Rademacher, another friend of mine, operated the camera in a lot of these shots. And you see that the visuals flow together very much. This actress's name is Barbara Viefhaus, and she's just a great actress, the way she looks so angrily. And we saw there advertising for Silver Meshes discs again on the television. Yeah, Konstantin is very exhausted. And I do like this changing from a very, very angry monologue into this slapstick scene to make it all very unpredictable. And the sequence that's coming up now is actually one of my favorites. It's starring Helmut Berger, and it's the arts performance scene. And I actually wrote it quite early on when writing the film, because I put in a lot of experiences I had at real-life arts performances where I met quite a few pretentious people, and I thought, let's give it all a very comedic twist. That sequence was originally supposed to be in German, and it was shorter. But we filmed it in August 2015, relatively late during the filming of the film. We filmed it from June 2014 until October 2015, very early in October 2015, because I basically do it in my free time. A lot of the actors do it in their free time. So sometimes we film 3 days in a block, then we don't film anything for 3 weeks while I organize the next scenes. And so this scene was filmed relatively late, and I always wanted to cast somebody special for the main character, for the arts professor and for the other guy there, the other artist. And I had the idea to cast Helmut Berger for quite a while because I'm good friends with Tinto Brass, an Italian director whose early works, whose 1960s experimental works especially, I admire because they are just very, very good at advancing cinematic language. And Helmut Berger starred in one of his films called Salon Kitty, and I love Helmut Berger as an actor. And so I got Helmut Berger on board and Zachi, who starred in especially the Lemon Popsicle films in the 1980s. And this scene was very, very pleasant to film. We filmed it over 2 days. And you see, Matthias did the cinematography here because I'm acting, at least in most shots. When I'm not acting, I like to film some shots myself. And the lighting here is beautiful. Matthias set it up. I told him kind of how I would like it to look. And it's really, really well done. And I like the scene, how it turned out visually. And it's also very comedic. We had this great time. So this was in early August 2015. I visited Helmut Berger in Austria a few weeks before that, and we went through his role for quite a while, a whole evening. We talked about every line, and I like it. He just went into character while discussing the role, and all of his suggestions, there was no ego behind it. Just he wanted to make his role more, more thorough, and we had a blast collaborating, and I just enjoyed this very, very much. The breakable glass bottles that you'll see towards the end, that was also a lot of fun. So I remember a little bit before I did this scene, my good friend Hugo Niebeling, who sadly passed away a few weeks ago, visited me in Stuttgart, and he saw these breakable glass bottles, and we talked a lot about them and had a lot of fun. Hugo Niebeling is another film director who did very, very impressive films, especially music films, industrial films, and all that. And we did a few films together. I edited them with him in 2015. And so I always keep thinking of that when I see the sequence. So now this part here, the part coming up with the heartbeat, that was one addition to the scene I made when I decided to rewrite it. As I said, originally the scene was not in English. Then I thought, let's make it more interesting. Arnold here is a slapstick element. He does not understand English, so he's just, looking at the microphone and kind of having fun playing with the microphone, while the others are doing their English conversations that he cannot follow anyway. And before casting Berger and Neu for this scene, I thought if I cast them for just one sequence, it should be more meaningful. So I wrote this whole sequence of people doing small talk, or not only small talk, but just these very strange, meaningless set phrases, while Konstantin is forced to listen, which is the upcoming scene. And Zachi Neu's idea was it to get all this food from the buffet on his plate in this scene, and that worked beautifully. The catering was done by Lizzy restaurant in Stuttgart, and they did these beautiful plates. They had to look exactly the same on both days of filming. And you see how full his plate is. You see, and that's the plate he's carrying all the time. And this camera move I did myself, and you can see the camera moves, then it zooms, then it moves again. I like to have a lot of motion in the cinematography to make it more interesting, more free-flowing. And Zachi Neu here had a lot of very good ideas for his character also. We discussed it with him thoroughly, his character. So it was his idea to have this mustache, and I wanted to make this character very funny, so he brought this tie with the Canadian symbols that you don't see in this shot but in others, just to look a little bit more random and a little bit more interesting and bizarre in his character. And the faces you see here, all the actors in this scene, are mostly students I know, friends of mine, who tried acting, who wanted to give acting a try, and we all had a blast during the scene. And in the end, when the bottles are smashed, I wanted to make sure that most of them got to smash something, either a bottle or a plate, because it's fun. And they're made from this easily breakable plastic. They used to be made from sugar, but for a few years or decades, I don't know, they've been made out of this special plastic. And I want to make filming an experience as joyful for everybody. So I thought they are standing in the background for 2 days. Let them fight as well. So fight in quotation marks. And the one guy to the left there, oh, this is Maria, a good friend of mine. And the one on the left is Miguel, who actually assists me quite a lot. He was the stand-in for me in some of the later sequences. I'll tell you about it. And here, when he makes this noise, there was actually no noise during filming. Here you see the breakable glass at first. Most of these were very spontaneous ideas. I just thought, let's make this a very strange scene with breakable objects. Here he pulls out the cable. There should be no way that this sound continues. And this sound I did in post-production. On the set there was really nothing. So everybody's acting as if there's some loud noise. So I just thought, let's make this crazy and have people smash bottles, smash glasses. But as always, I like to decide on set what exactly is happening. And in the screenplay, actually, Konstantin and Arnold would run away and they would be followed by this group from this scene. See, that was Helmut Berger's idea, to smash the bottle. And basically I told everybody we can smash things, and then Helmut Berger had the idea, let me smash this bottle on his head because his character insulted my character. And Helmut Berger then leaves and laughs. That was also a spontaneous idea. You see Maximilian in the background. He's in so many sequences. And Helmut Berger, after standing in the door laughing, he came to me and said, it's sad that you probably didn't catch it on film. And I said, yes, we did catch it on film. Because I do like the cinematography to be spontaneous. And if something comes up, we just follow it with the camera. So it was not set to be just a close-up, but we just went with him. So originally Konstantin and Arnold were running away. This whole group would just follow them, and they run away and get into some nightclub, and the bouncer doesn't let the group in. And in the nightclub, Konstantin again does some very cynical monologue about dating in today's time, where there's just loud music and alcohol, and he hates it. But I decided to cut it before filming. Now this sequence was done with my very good friend Robin, who's playing the collector here. It was done at his place. He actually does collect, old records and old technology. And I basically wrote this sequence for him because I wanted to give him a role in the film. In my previous film, Breakup, he advised me on a good song for the opening credits, and he transferred some Edison cylinders for me. And see, this effect here to the right, Arnold sitting there trying to open the package, that was an idea I had on set to make the scene more interesting. We started rehearsing, and Sebastian just took a seat there because he said his character doesn't do anything right now, he should just be sitting there. And when we rehearsed it, I thought it would be fun to have him in the foreground trying to open a package. So we filmed it that way, and I tried to give many shots more life through such elements. It's a dialogue between two people, of course, but let's have something happen silently that might even draw the attention of the viewers. Here explaining all this technology. This was a day of filming towards the end of December 2014, and it was relatively uneventful. Matthias did the cinematography, we filmed lots of close-ups to intercut, and I did like this interesting set. And Klaus Müller did the sound, the actor who also performed in a lot of these scenes. And Robin's apartment is always very tidy, so I wanted more machines in it. So I asked him, let's put a tape recorder and a radio on the floor in one of the corners, and you see them. He asked me, why would I have them on the floor? But I just wanted to put more things around. The actress doing the introduction here, her name is Aline, and when I met her, I wanted her in the film. So I put her here as the television speaker, and I actually met her when the film was already started, so after the American actors were in it. I filmed the introduction sometime in September 2014, and here's Philip as Chancellor Schmidt. But so I cast her, and I rewrote the last part of the film, and I'm going to tell you more about it as it plays. But so we showed this actually on the television set in black and white, and we just filmed the television. And I remember when we filmed this sequence with Philip, it was quite funny. I had ordered some flags for the background, but it didn't arrive on time. So he arrived when we were filming this, and basically I was doing the cinematography and he was doing the acting, so it was just the two of us, and there were no flags. So we went to a flag store actually in town to buy them, and it was raining, so we went into the rain to buy the flags and get back and put the flags in position. So it was actually a pretty memorable day of filming and quite exhausting, although he's just sitting there doing his monologue. And while we don't hear him here in the background, he did more and more crazy things during the monologue. He started talking as Chancellor, a story about a coffee house that closed down in his neighborhood, but he really liked it, and so on. And then he talks about invading other countries and connects it to that. We had great fun filming the monologue, but in the film you only hear the relatively serious parts. But if you listen closely in German, you can probably hear him. And yeah, the ending, that's as scripted again. So I filmed a lot of improvisation because I knew the television would be running in the background. And that's when Philip went crazy with the monologue. Now this sequence here, we filmed it at Fischer Appelt agency in Stuttgart. They were extremely generous. I told them of the project, I told them of my other works, and they just let us have it for free because they wanted to support a young filmmaker and his film, which was very, very nice of them. And the actor and the actress on the left, Dominic and Caro, their characters already appeared in Breakup in a very different setting, so I wanted to make this a kind of inside joke for people who had seen both films. And it was very nice to approach Fischer Appelt because I saw on the internet they rented out this location and I called them, and they had this with many, many people during this film. Well, I just liked the location and I talked to them and they were very nice. So I actually saw how generous people can be about supporting a film, a project, which made me very happy, obviously. And this whiteboard or this paper behind Jenny's character, Jane, that you'll soon see when the camera shows it, I put some very bizarre things on it. We had a lot of fun. You see here, ways to success, it reads. And it's this kind of chart that looks like it makes sense, but it doesn't really. And in the middle, there are 3 different currencies. So if you put creativity and innovation together, it forms dollar, for example. And there are a lot of these gags in the whole film. And again, I do these scenes without storyboarding them. I have ideas in my head how they should look like. And to me, being on set feels a little bit like being a painter or someone doing a sketch. I know how the scene is supposed to look, and then I feel the flow, basically. And I pretty much know we need the close-ups here, the other shots there, and then we do the close-ups, and then we do these detail shots. And we did filming here very quickly. I did most of the cinematography, Tanja Rademacher and Robin did the sound. And just to show you the spirit of filming on this film, so for example, Tanja picked me up with her car and we drove there and then we did this, and always, these people were driving us, we were helping us, and I was helping them if possible with their projects. And it's always a very, very nice spirit. I really like to think back of these times when we did the film. It sounds so nostalgic, it was a year ago, but still, it's just a great time with many great friends. And here Konstantin appears with his accordion. In most of my films, if not all of my films, there are funny songs advancing the storyline. And in Timeless, I wanted to make it really bizarre. Konstantin with the accordion and performing this song about, selling out, basically. And I had a similar character in Breakup, actually. The character I play in Breakup with the accordion. But this shot, so I love this corridor at Fischer Appelt Agency. And then Konstantin in the background. I remember there were some people from the agency standing right next to me as I'm standing there with the accordion, moving like that, which was very bizarre. And I felt a little bit ashamed of standing there moving like that, but nobody had a problem, so it was fun. Now here, the police station, this was fun to make. We made it more and more bizarre. The 2 people playing the police officers, Patrick and Christoph, they had all these ideas. He said, let me drink a bottle of beer and try to shave my beard during this. And there are always these guns everywhere. Patrick puts his police badge underneath his cap. And all these guns everywhere. That's kind of a reoccurring motive of the film. And they have the police in their station with all the guns, which makes it very absurd and funny. And now suddenly Arnold finds out about World War II, which is very dramatic, and at the same time you see, up to this part in the story, nobody has told him actually of what happened in the past. He gets into the present, gets connected with Jane and all these crazy characters, and really is confused about all. Now the World War II scene we filmed also at Manufaktur Ziegenbein in 2014, when it was emptied to be renovated. And Harry Lennix had to leave very, very early that day because his plane was going. He had to reschedule his flight back for some other reasons. So we actually started filming at, I think, 4 in the morning. It was pretty intense. All these World War II uniforms. Generally, I put a lot of effort into making all these war scenes especially as authentic as possible. And this is supposed to be an American TV show or, some film on TV. So the war scene here is quite clean in quotation marks. You see the uniforms are not very dirty and it looks more sterile compared to the German one we'll see later. And that was the idea, to make this more or less a war as it's seen on television and in cinema, more, rather in quotation marks, clean, while the real war we see in the end is very dirty. And here again is Harry's speech. So Harry's character, Johnson, is doing all these speeches that convince Miles' character to do things that are bad for him, and there's some character development. In the beginning, in the interrogation scene, Miles just goes with it. Here, Miles kind of hesitates, and in the last one, in the sitcom, he really gets angry and he does it, but he doesn't really want to do it. And by the way, so Arnold is reading the World War II book in the other scene, and in the original exposition to Konstantin's character that I cut and shortened to make the car scene, originally Konstantin explained to him, you cannot really talk to others about it because maybe scientists or the government will get a hold of you and they will do all kinds of tests on you as a time traveler. You will not be able to live regularly, so just stick to me. As when I wrote it, I thought there would be some explanation, it would need some explanation, but during filming I realized it's much funnier to have Arnold just this very naive guy who's been, thrown from one situation to the next, and here finally he discovered what World War II was like. He switches on television and then he sees this very cleaned up, so to say, version of the war where it's not dirty, it's very, filmic, and then he switches channels. And I had a lot of ideas for things to run on channels.
They'll seem to be whispering their lines and trying hard not to fully comprehend that they're in the worst film ever made.
And Arnold doesn't like it and switches channels. And I like this self-irony in my films. And here's Florian Wess. He's acting together with Zachi, and he's quite well known in Germany. And it's great to have him in the film. And you see these tattoos, they are all his, so I decided to make the scene of the girl doing a remark on his tattoos. And it's very funny because Zachi character, Reagan, who has been seen in the sequence with Helmut Berger and who pretends to be this great artist in the scene, suddenly here is selling some flirt guide on TV, which is not as great and pretentious. So it was a very comedic effect. And the girl there is Julia Zattari, who has also acted in most of my films. She's been in Menschenliebe, she's been in Breakup, and I have this circle of friends, a lot of people who like to be in the films, and I like them, and they're always in the films. And there was one more channel I actually wanted to show. It was my friend Hugo Niebeling. He studied acting before becoming a director in the 1950s, and he did some monologues from Hamlet, and I recorded them. But for pacing reasons, I had to cut it out because it became too much, these switching channels. But I have the footage and I might show it sometime. So here Konstantin comes home with the portrait of Schmidt. And this scene was originally supposed to go on much longer. Because you notice, the tone of the film is getting more serious. And there was one more comedic insert. When Konstantin starts talking, I just met this intern of the Chancellor's office. And it was horrible, I had a date, but she just talked about her. And we filmed the date, actually. So he's sitting with her, and she keeps talking of herself, and then suddenly Konstantin starts imagining that she's actually talking about sex. So suddenly the screen goes black and white, and we have this very quick music, and it's edited to the music, not explicit, with a lot of details, like Eisenstein in a comedic way. Konstantin imagines her talking about sex while she's actually just talking about her boring everyday life. And then it cuts back to him as she asks him, are you not listening at all? But then during editing this scene, I realized a comedic moment would be too much. And we did not even film the black and white footage, which would have just been symbols, a moving desk, for example, some springs in a bed compressing and stuff like that. So it would have been very abstract. But I wanted to stick with a more serious tone. So with my film, with Timeless, I like to use this analogy of how Weimar-era Germany turned into Nazi Germany in the 1930s. So basically, the film starts out very carefree, so to say. We have a lot of slapstick moments, it's all very funny. And then it becomes more serious, as you're about to see. A bit like how Weimar era Germany, a very liberal society or more liberal society, turned into a totalitarian society, Nazi Germany, relatively quickly. And I wanted to make the Chancellor, Schmidt, who's presented here in the film, not use any traditional ideology to basically show that the danger of totalitarian thought is not limited to the more traditional ideologies. Any ideology can turn dangerous as soon as it starts cutting the rights of others. So I made Schmidt just saying these very ridiculous things about love and all that, so to make him more general, more a symbol of totalitarian thought than of any system in specific. So these scenes when they're burning the manuscripts, actually that's the introduction of my novel Fetzenleben that they're burning here. And I thought of burning the whole pages, but it didn't work out really. It looked very stupid. So we decided to make them wet, which you see here. And it's more a realistic setting, you know. They are not doing it with much preparation. They're not thinking that burning the pages will make the whole apartment go the air go very unbreathable. So they make them wet and then they create these kind of snowman figures. That's again one more absurd element in the storyline. So even though the film gets more serious, I wouldn't go for total realism in it. We still have more absurdist elements. And again, this was done without storyboards. So I operated the camera here and I noticed that the sink of this bathtub looked very interesting, so I just moved it. And the idea for this shot, zooming out and people walking through it, I actually had from one of my favorite films, The Graduate by Mike Nichols. There's one shot where the main character is sitting and Miss Robinson is walking through the frame, very blurry, and slowly the camera zooms out and we see her walking from left to right. I made this in black and white. It fits the mood and I do like to play with such effects, but actually when he's shooting her, the blood effects that I did digitally turned out not very well, and I thought I could spend more time to polish them, but actually I don't want to shock people with blood effects, so I just made it black and white and it looked fine because the color was too intense. And we did this scene right after shooting the previous scene. I like to put everything in a block basically. And I was very exhausted. He was very exhausted after filming. So we were just sitting there and there was not as much acting involved in this sequence. And you see these figures, these so-called snowmen, I actually created them by using some old scripts that I wrote, you know, old script drafts that I had printed multiple copies of that I didn't need anymore. You know, making them wet and making them these figures. And I actually had done these figures before doing the film, just for fun. So then we saw the paper wouldn't burn. We thought, hey, let's put these figures into the storyline. And it worked out. And now you can see Helmut Berger's line, art should influence society again. I wanted to make it this reoccurring motive quite late into production, after we filmed Helmut Berger's scene, towards September 2015 I started putting this in. I generally edit the scenes right after filming them. Sometimes, we filmed Helmut Berger's scene in 2 days, so after the first day I went home, edited the first half of the film, went to bed at 3, woke up again at 7 and we filmed the second day, and then after the second day the scene was already finished in rough cut. So I edit very quickly generally. So this is Aline's character's introduction. And you see the shirt she's wearing, she's opening it up so that Arnold, who's very shy in the film, can just look down, and we always did these funny looks of his. And so when I met her, I wanted to give her a role in the film, but Gudrun was already cast. In the first version of the film, Arnold would fall in love with Gudrun, the dominatrix, and there would be conflict because he would get jealous. So then I decided to give Aline a role, and I decided to make her character, Elizabeth, seduce Arnold, manipulate Arnold, and it gave this film this great dynamic of all this political dimension behind it, to make Konstantin and Gudrun more anarchists without many connections into the world, basically. Konstantin wants to do a revolution, Gudrun wants to do a revolution. Aline is the one who actually connects them to everything and who actually uses everybody, so to say. And it was a very good thing. And I do like Aline. She studied acting. She actually lives in the US most of the time. Her family is from the US and Germany. So she speaks perfect German, she speaks perfect English, which made her perfect for the role. That's why I made her the CIA agent, who speaks both languages so well. And you see, this look. Sebastian, the actor, found it very strange to do these looks. And I filmed them in multiple scenes, and I'll tell you later on where I cut them. And the scene coming now when they're walking, we filmed it right after the scene when they're talking. Because Aline didn't live in my hometown, so she had to actually travel here to film it. So she was there for, I think, 2 weekends where we filmed all the scenes with her. It was very intense. And this scene, when they're running, so carefree to Beethoven's 7th, I do like it very much to use classical music and to edit to it. And I had the idea for that scene sometimes in late 2013, early 2014, when running through a train station, and I just like this carefree feeling. And scenes like these are one of the reasons why Hugo Niebeling and I became friends. Because Hugo Niebeling did all his music films in the 60s and 70s, I like to edit to classical music in this way. And so I like his films, he liked mine, so we became quite close and we started collaborating on some projects, which was great. And this is actually also filmed in the evening, which was great, the lighting. Here's Rick Shapiro. I filmed him when the American actors were there. This was filmed in spring of 2015, Rick Shapiro was filmed earlier, and here is Bob again with the camera. And I had the idea to put him in because I didn't really know how to end the music there. Because Beethoven's music gets to this high point and then it continues, and I didn't want to fade it out. So I had the idea, hey, I have this shot of the camera shutter there with Bob taking a photo of Bob's character taking a photo. So let's just put him there and take the photo, and that shutter noise stops the music. And these things with the structure, Schmidt's speech here on television was actually supposed to be in the part where Arnold switches channels, but then I decided to put him there as a better transition, and now we get to the revolutionary scenes. Gudrun and Konstantin basically want to do a revolution, and Aline's character, Elizabeth, helps them. And it gets more and more absurd because I wanted to put a lot of guns in this part of the film, and Elizabeth always supplies the revolutionaries with guns, telling them that her grandfather brought her those. And the guns you see right now, they're Thompson submachine guns, and I made this kind of joke in the film, or joke is the wrong word, but I made it an interesting thing. There's every variation of the Thompson submachine gun ever made visible on screen in this film, just to make it more interesting. Some have a barrel with these fins, some have smooth barrels, some have different rear sides. Then there's a World War II variation that's seen in the World War II scene. And filming in this apartment was pretty challenging because, you know, I wanted to get a lot of interesting camera angles. At the same time, there were very long dialogue scenes. We had to rehearse a lot. So, and you see these brief intercuts to the heartbeat. In this scene, we did a lot of improvisation, and the screenplay was quite long. And I realized, no, we don't need that much information in the film. So I shortened it. And in order to mask the cuts, I could have masked them other ways also, but I started putting in these small inserts, and I realized this makes the scene way more interesting and sophisticated. Having Helmut Berger's character, Professor Martin, in there doing his lines, and then having shots, you know, of destroying the car window and so on, set to the heartbeat, giving the scene a rhythm. That was Barbara's dog, Kiro, by the way. Barbara is the actress who's playing Gudrun. And Barbara was also in my previous film, Breakup, as a philosopher. And I like this kind of extreme character, you know, extreme in a way. She's pretty funny, you know, as a dominatrix. And we had this scene go on much longer during filming, because I wanted to give these revolutionaries some ideology and make it a big argument between Gudrun's character, who wants it very ideological, and Konstantin, who wants no ideology, who's rather anarchistic. This is Thomas Görsch, a great actor from my hometown of Stuttgart. Actually, he's done very many international productions. but I met him here, and we did a lot of these funny scenes with the domination, which was of course not real domination. Nobody was hurting each other, and the candle is not a real candle, but one that doesn't burn at a high temperature. And that part that you just saw was actually supposed to go into a later montage, but then during editing I thought it's more interesting to show one example of this domination earlier on in the film. And you see all these quick cuts are somehow foreshadowing. We saw Arnold sitting in World War II crying briefly, here again, in rhythm. So this sequence kind of summarizes the film until now and foreshadows the rest. So really it's becoming a different film from this part on, and that was my goal, to make it unpredictable what is about to happen. And I remember the first version of the scene going on for very long. You know, we had Gudrun telling us how much money she had at home, and then we have this idea for the bank robbery scene. And the bank robbery scene is, you saw Helmut Berger's eyes moving when they were kind of moving in to kiss. I like this funny effect. And here the bank robbery sequence, that was actually the very last scene we filmed in early October 2015. I think in the making of documentary of the film, I might say we filmed the last scene in September, but actually I think it was this one, I think in the very first week of October. And it was great. The customer here is Gregor Sauvageau, who already played in my very first film, Killer Squirrels, and he actually drove to my town just to film this. Nadine Knobloch, a very talented young actress, she plays the person at the cashier at the bank. And this scene was only possible because of the great support of the bank and of Filmbord Karlsruhe, whom I know for quite a while. And I told them what kind of scene I would like to film, and they helped organizing with the bank, getting the bank location, and getting the extras for the scene. And it was a very fun sequence. So in this sequence, actually nobody does the camera. I just put the camera on tripods because of some scheduling reasons. I put the camera on tripods and checked that it looked okay. And the close-ups where I'm not in the frame, I just did myself. It worked out beautifully, you see. And you see, I like these close-ups, I like these montages. And here's Michael, whose car we used here in the film. He's playing Konstantin's driver, so that's him. And on the back seat, he has his skeleton as a gag. So when people ask him, what's that? He says, oh, that's the previous owner. So we put that gag in here because we all had a good laugh about it. And he actually introduced me to the people who got the car to be smashed in the beginning. So it's all a very tightly knit circle of friends I made with this film. And here we get to the domination scenes. And they were very funny to film, and we had a hard time not to laugh. She's not really hurting the guy lying there. She's just doing this, and I put in effects. And it's very often not me when wearing the mask, so I could do the cinematography in that sequence. And here you see getting the cigars, because Konstantin's character is smoking cigars. You have some nudity, some toplessness. I'm pretty shy about that. So I had the idea and I kind of told it to Barbara, and she just said, okay, no problem. If it fits the scene, it makes sense, of course, let's put this in. So this whole sequence is set to vintage music to give it this interesting feel. This didn't hurt him. The cigarette was actually cold, and it was, put out earlier, but it looks very strange. And you see all these scenes, you just had a blast filming them. And when I now show it to people, many think, oh gosh, it must have hurt very much and this is so bad. But actually it wasn't. And we have a lot of these close-ups in front of the black wall with the guns and all that. And this sequence in the park, basically when Aline was there, we put all the scenes that she was in a little compact block of filming. So we filmed this right before filming the last scene when they're preparing the instruments. And, actually that's Barbara's dog Kiro again. It was just very nice, very carefree. I enjoyed giving this little moment of rest into the sequence. And I wrote actually the sequence pretty detailed. That's Rick Shapiro's dog, Agent 99. You will see the dog again a little later. So for this whole sequence of the dominations and all that, I did have quite a detailed screenplay. And here's Angus Macfadyen, I'll tell you more about him later. But I had a pretty detailed screenplay, but then we had the crew assembled, and I thought, let's just film whatever feels right at the moment. And it's really this feeling of continuing creation of the film, of the screenplay even, while filming and then while editing. So I had all this footage, and it was just a great joy to edit it all together, to see how it works out. And Angus Macfadyen appears later in the film as a character called Dr. Meyer, and when we were filming that scene, I thought, let's put his interview in it also. That's Michael's other car, a Mercedes. So actually we filmed with his 2 cars in the film. And here's where David's character first appears. The actor, David Parkosh, is the brother of Jennifer Parkosh, who plays Jane. And this scene here, when he pulls out the gun and shoots it, this was not a shooting gun, this was just a very crude thing that didn't fire anything. It's just a prop. So this muzzle flash and the noise, that's all post-production. And you notice the car's windows are closed in the faraway shot, so they would have shot through the windows or something like that. But it's just fun to watch. And actually we first filmed the scene with Michael's other car with a skeleton inside, and we filmed that one. Here, when the window is smashed, that's Agent 99 again, the dog. And so David's character, called David, which I found funny to just give him his real first name, steals a bag with again more guns. These are Israeli Uzi submachine guns. So the revolutionaries, actually, they get more and more guns, which kind of doesn't make sense because they're just this small group of people. Why do they get more and more and more? So it's this kind of element of the absurd I like to put in. The noise of the guy drowning in water, there was no water in the bathtub. I actually made that noise during editing, post-production. So I just grabbed a bowl of water, put it in front of the microphone, and made this kind of noise in it, which was very, very funny to do, and we see how it works. And the atmosphere on set was just very joyful. We were laughing between takes, we were joking around, coming up with a lot of new ideas, visual ideas, and all that. And now we see Angus Macfadyen again, interviewing Chancellor Schmidt. So when Angus Macfadyen visited, just to do this small scene, I met Angus Macfadyen through my friend Harry Lennix, who's playing the character Johnson. And then we became friends. So he visited, we did his scene as Dr. Meyer, and I thought, let's expand it more. So let him do the interview with Chancellor Schmidt. And my reasoning for it is that Arnold might have seen the interview on television and then dreams of this in the trial scene. You see again another gun. Aline's character always gives them guns, always her grandfather got them from somewhere, which leads us to this scene with a lot of stuff. I like the cinematography in the beginning with the shadows and these quick shots. That's really better than I anticipated when writing, because during filming, that's one of the reasons I rarely use storyboards. I do have ideas for the shots that are pretty precise, but then during filming you see a shadow on the wall and you can just grab that little detail and put it in the montage. You see these comments here. My brother makes $4,000 in a week, and this comment here actually tells us what's going on, but nobody believes it because it's hidden in a lot of spam. So it's just a very bizarre sequence. And I remember filming this scene was very challenging in particular, because you see it's a very, very long dialogue between multiple characters. We had to do a lot of camera angles. Again, the total view for the whole scene and then the close-ups. So it felt more like rehearsing a theater piece, actually, because we were playing the scene from beginning to end. And it's a long sequence. So for the total views, we filmed it from beginning to end a few times. And then for the close-ups, you see again the dog there. And for the close-ups, we filmed, of course, only some details sometimes. But I remember it being very exhausting. And when you see something on the laptop or on a television, I usually just show it on a laptop or on the television. And I had actually thought a lot about how to make the scene visually interesting. And I do like to do detail shots of the surroundings to make scenes visually more interesting. And basically the dynamics in this revolutionary group is very funny. We have Konstantin and Gudrun who kind of argue, but are also together, which is very strange. She argues she wants ideology, Konstantin doesn't. But they're a couple or not. And then there's David, who's just kind of a fan of Konstantin in the scene. Then there's Arnold and Lizzy. And Arnold is kind of in love with Lizzy, but she's super dominant to him. And she just follows her own agenda. So it's kind of like a very dysfunctional group that still sticks together and has some comedic potential. Although I wanted to make the scenes also more dramatic. And the lighting here is very nice. At the location, basically the lights on the ceiling were not that strong, and there were these red curtains in front of the window. So the whole scene had this orange tint, which Matthias and I really liked. And this is one of the scenes where I focused almost exclusively on acting. So I told Matthias, let's do a close-up of this person. Let's do a total view of this. But I trusted him entirely. So, and then he said, oh, this looked good. Oh, no, this didn't look good. Let's do it again. So some of the close-ups I did myself and I'm not in the frame. But really this working together with Matthias is just a joy. And you see this angle I think is beautiful. This kind of between Konstantin and the computer from down below. And we filmed the revolutionary scenes on 2 weekends in the April of 2015 when Aline was there. So the first scene was Lizzy, Arnold, Konstantin meeting, and on that day we filmed that scene plus running to the railroad station but plus kissing. The next day, which was a Sunday, we filmed the first scene at the revolutionary apartment, which was the one which I intercut with a lot of small shots. And then the next weekend, we started by filming this very long sequence on Saturday. And on Sunday, we started by filming the sequence when they're walking through the park. And then we filmed the sequence at the apartment before the big concert, which is coming up later. And then the sequence of all of them walking on the street. So really, it was 2 very, very intense weekends when Aline was there. And we filmed her solo one more day, which was way before that, which was her as a newscast announcer and then the trial scene. So all these revolutionary scenes we filmed in this small apartment felt very intense because it was just so compact. And you see, I like to break up dialogues with close-ups of different people. And I remember when Sebastian and I discussed the screenplay, he was thinking his character Arnold is only following others basically and only doing what others say. But actually he's very trusting, very naive in the beginning, and now he got maneuvered in a situation that he cannot really control, and he's desperate about it. So actually there's no way for him out right now. By the way, this particular scene when the two of them are talking, we filmed again Matthias and I, because my character has just left the room, so I did the second camera, so we did it relatively quickly, and I'm happy about how the editing turned out in this scene. We see again with these detailed shots and the shadows and all that. So when she reveals herself, the music that we hear in the background, it's a good time to talk about that, because much of the film is 1920s, 1930s music. The theme you hear right now, I composed, and you hear the same theme when Konstantin burns his manuscripts and the police writes his plays. This theme, I originally thought it would be a song that's played when Konstantin burns the books with lyrics. I recorded the instrumentals and they worked so well, so I scrapped the lyrics. And then I needed some music here, so I just performed the same theme in a different way on the synthesizer. I usually compose the original soundtrack for my films myself. It started out with Killer Squirrels, where I composed about 80% of the soundtrack, with the rest being classical pieces, and I've been doing it ever since. Also the funny songs and all that are by me often. You see, by the way, Arnold is growing a beard in the film. So this was a continuity thing that was a bit challenging, because I wanted to illustrate the passage of time. So the characters would have a beard, or would have more of a beard as the story goes on. But we didn't film it all in sequence. So this was April 2015. Then we filmed, for example, the sequence with the arts performance in August. So, of course, in August he's again clean shaven, and we had this thing, we filmed other things. So he had to grow a beard and shave it, which was a bit of an organizing thing. So this sequence, the sitcom sequence, that was a lot of fun to film, and it features the American actors again. Harry Lennix here, Miles Hunter, and Rick Shapiro will be coming in also. We filmed this the day after the interrogation sequence you saw in the beginning of the film. It was a great comic relief from this more dark interrogation. And on set, during rehearsals, the tone of the scene changed. In the screenplay, I wanted the sitcom to be less bizarre and absurd. So for example, Rick Shapiro's character was supposed to look like a real repairman. So it's more mysterious. Is he actually a repairman or not? What is going on? And the acting, I thought, should be more naturalistic. So then we started rehearsing it. And quickly we all realized, let's make this as funny as possible and as absurd as possible. We have all of that there. A guy in a squirrel costume, which I actually used in my very first film, Killer Squirrels, for one sequence. That's actually already a very bizarre scenario. And then Rick Shapiro suggested that he should be topless, have these working pants, but be topless. And that's when the whole thing started to get really absurd. And I like it much better this way. And I find it funny and great how scenes can turn better and better if you do rehearsals, if you do lots of rehearsals. That's what I really like doing. He did a lot of takes. And I picked the one who did, "Oh fuck, how are you tonight?" He did a lot of funny things. Also, Harry did a lot of funny faces when entering the door. And I do like to do a lot of takes for the actors to show all that they want and then to be able to pick in editing. And Matthias and I, again, did the cinematography, the two of us. And the shot where you see Harry and Harry's character, Johnson, take a sip from the bottle, I actually put that in from a different shot. See the handcuffs on the belt of Rick's character. I wanted to give these subtle signals, so to say. But this one shot, where Harry's character is taking a sip from the bottle, it's actually the same shot, but at a different moment he took that sip. Then I noticed, when Miles' character talks to Rick's character, it would be funny to have that moment in it. So I just put them together. Other than that, the film really has very little special effects. I like to do filming more like 1960s, 1970s, kind of underground filmmaking, so to say. Or let's say 1960s, 70s, not high-budget filmmaking, where you really could do little in terms of special effects outside the camera. So I like to film it with very few digital effects, which is very good for films that are not super high budget, of course. I have ideas for some bigger films also, but for this kind of film I really like this style. And now Rick is doing a rant again, like in the beginning of the film. And again, here there's a screenplay, and he kind of follows the screenplay, but also goes off with his own improvisation, which is beautiful, And so parts of it is a screenplay, parts of it is his ideas, and then the editing, something really good comes out of it. You should see him on stage one day. So when I first met him in Los Angeles, I saw him performing at the Comedy Store, I believe, at this comedy club. It is just incredible. He does these long monologues. I know that he prepares them, but it seems that the energy on stage, he's very spontaneous. So, someone in the audience said something, and then he just used that and integrated it and made it all very spontaneous. So you give Rick some topic, and he can just go off of it with some very great improvisation. Now he's getting the gun. Notice the kind of cupboard he takes the gun from. That's one very absurd element. And when Johnson asks the first thing, is this thing even legal? It's just a very, very funny moment, because when someone points a gun at somebody, why would the first question be if it's legal? So would it be legal for you to possess this? Can you shoot me with this? And in the screenplay, he responds, yes, I have a class 3 permit to own a firearm, which is in the United States, the permit that's needed to own a fully automatic firearm. But then when we rehearse it, we realize it's much funnier if he says something, I got this from my grandma. So the whole thing got very funny. And of course it's supposed to be an American sitcom. So that's why I put in these American references and the laughter, the canned laughter. So I remember when I showed a rough cut of this scene to a German friend of mine here in Germany, we filmed it in Germany, so I showed a rough cut of the scene to this friend of mine, and he asked me, you see, this scene is funny, why do you put this laughter into your film? And he actually thought I put it in throughout the whole film. But it's supposed to be a sitcom, so that's why the laughing is there. And here's again one of the monologues, and it's always the same music. And again, Miles gets convinced to do something that's against his own interest by this monologue. But this time, he's less happy about it. We had these great times when Miles, Rick, and Harry were here. We would go out in the evenings, we would sit in restaurants, and all of us, the crew and them, we would all talk about a lot of things. And that's something I love about the actors who played in this film. Harry, for example, and Rick also. They have both very significant careers. Harry, for example, he's known from Hollywood films that are seen in cinemas across the world. He is in very famous American TV shows in significant parts, and he also has been in a lot of films and TV shows in the past, so his career is really going well for many, many years. And he's just very humble, very kind, just a gentleman through and through, and he's really one of my closest friends there in Hollywood. And it's just amazing to see these people who are so successful being so humble, mixing with the crew of a relatively small German production compared to the films that they do otherwise. I mean, Harry has been in films that cost $200 million, it was just a great time, and I like to think back to it a lot because I met all of them separately in the United States, Harry, Rick, and Miles and Rick I met together, but suddenly to have them in Germany and we all interact and we all spent the evenings talking, and it was just great. And here the scene continues, so they just watched the sitcom, and that's something I really liked, to break up these dramatic moments. We have this very dramatic moment and it suddenly gets broken up with this very strange sitcom. That's the unpredictable element of the film that I really wanted to put in. And we have these funny moments also interrupting some serious ones when they kiss in the railroad station and the photographer takes a photo of them. And you see Arnold is very, very desperate with the situation now. And Lizzy, Lean's character, really isn't even trying to seduce him anymore. She's just now telling him, if you don't support this plan, you're dead, which puts him in a horrible spot. And that's what leads to the trial sequence. The trial sequence is very similar to one I did in my previous film, Breakup, where Gregor Sauvageau, who was playing the bank customer, actually played the judge. And see this montage, that's what I really like, to go very experimental. And here it starts to mix the American scenes with the German ones. Sebastian was on set when we filmed the interrogation, so we filmed these few shots. And Harry is very good at doing this fake beating. His fist did not touch Arnold's face, but it looks so authentic, this shadow shot here was just a very spontaneous improvisation when doing the American World War II scene, which cuts to the trial sequence. So the trial sequence, it was filmed in a black room, and we just had a backdrop for one person. So every actor was filmed separately. So I first filmed Harry. When he arrived, just going through his lines, telling him where the other people would be, so he looks in the right direction. And he delivered the lines perfectly. I wanted, he's a famous Shakespearean actor also, and so I wanted to make the lines more Shakespearean, make them rhyme. And him and we went through his lines together, and he improved them to make them more Shakespearean, which was a great honor for me and also a great pleasure. And, I still have the manuscript that we worked on, so, the lines, and we talked about them, and we did this. And here is again one of Rick's monologues. And it's funny how well this all intercuts. It sounds like I'm bragging about the cutting skills, but I'm meaning the performances also. You see, they were filmed days apart. Rick stayed longer in Germany than Harry did. So we filmed Rick after Harry had left, and we did the World War II scene and all that. And Miles and Sebastian on the table, we also did separately. So this whole thing seemed very fragmented when filming. But to see how it works, they look in the right directions and how they look to each other, at each other, how they interact. It appears as if they're in the same room. Oh, here I am again. And I wanted to have everybody speak in rhymes, except for the state's attorney performed by Rick, because I wanted the state's attorney to be more a wild guy. He doesn't care about rhymes. He's just speaking his mind. And Harry's character, the judge, in one moment, also he yells order in the court, then he clears his throat and goes back to speaking in rhymes. I actually wrote a different screenplay that I hope to turn into a film at some point, where I have a similar trial scene that's very, very strange and very funny. And on that scene, I based this sequence. I have a lot of drafts for screenplays. I have some finished screenplays. And when I do a new film like Timeless, I like to go back to earlier drafts and get some ideas from them and modify them and integrate them. So it's always this process for me. So if I do this older screenplay with the trial scene, I would probably go back and make the trial scene more different than this one, for example. So I just like to write my own films. You can probably see that from the way I'm talking. So it's very interesting. Aline, for example, we filmed her in September 2014 when I also filmed her as the newscast speaker. And looking at this, I think the shots of Harry as the judge were the first things we filmed for this film. We filmed him as the judge one day before doing the interrogation scene, on the day before doing it. And looking at it makes me actually think how great it is how this film seemed to become bigger and more sophisticated, more significant as filming progressed. When we filmed the scenes with the American actors, I didn't know that we would have a tank in the end scene. I didn't think that a car would be smashed in the film. I didn't even know that Helmut Berger would be in the film, that the scene with the arts performance would have breaking bottles and all that. And generally, I try to make films look as big as possible while using a budget that's not that huge, which, for example, with Timeless, I did by spending a lot of time, basically. So there are lots of days of filming, lots of locations, and each individual day of filming is not that hard to organize. You have maybe 15 actors at most, which can be tough, of course, if most of them are friends who are not getting paid, so they can only do it in their free time, so you have to figure out when everybody has time to be on set. It takes quite some effort, actually, but it's doable. And if you have a lot of scenes with lots of different people, lots of different sets, it makes the film way more interesting visually. And it's doable with a relatively small budget if you spend a lot of time on it, like I did on Timeless. This wordplay, timeless, is kind of silly, and I didn't intend it as a wordplay, now I notice it. Anyway, so we saw Angus Macfadyen here as Dr. Meyer. Here he is. So he actually arrived a few weeks after the other American actors had left. We're friends, and I like to talk to him about all kinds of ideas about films. And we had a great time filming this sequence here. So Dr. Meyer, he was inspired by Peter Sellers from Dr. Strangelove, by the character as Dr. Strangelove, so as a mad scientist, so to say. And we filmed a lot of takes. In some he's speaking more sophisticated, more normal. In some he goes totally crazy as his character. And in the final film I intercut some that I found appropriate to the scene. And the ending of the scene, where the state attorney jumps up and does his monologue while we see these strange shots of Dr. Meyer with the bloody eyes and the big bra. That monologue, I think Rick improvised it. I might have given him some ideas, but he improvised it. And Angus Macfadyen, I think, had the idea, hey, why don't you put something surreal in it of Dr. Meyer and the bra? And then we kind of came up with this moment, which is very, very funny and strange and unexpected again. So you see, even the second part of the film that gets more serious, I decided to intercut the seriousness with a lot of strange and surrealistic moments. And you see how much we filmed on one day in this apartment. It started out with the scenes with them playing with the guns on the table, and then Lizzy reveals her true plan to Arnold, and then Arnold is so desperate sitting on the sofa. We called the dog behind the camera, so the dog Kiro came to us. And now this scene we filmed on the next day, and so this whole scene with the revolutionaries, starting with this shot, I'm very proud of the cinematography, and it was a shorter scene than the others, so Matthias and I really did the cinematography in a lot of detail, and I'm very happy how it turned out. So I don't know how I had the idea to use this German stick grenade. I remember it was not in the first version of the script. So in the first version of the script, the camera would pan to a calendar in the previous shot where Arnold is sitting on the sofa. Then we cut to the calendar a few weeks later and we cut to this scene. But I realized it's not necessary and kind of cheesy, to cut to a calendar and cut back. I mean, it's not necessarily cheesy, but in this context it would have been not ideal. And you see all these close-ups that I believe give the film more life. And you see, for example, here, Lizzy and Arnold look at each other. I had the idea, while standing there interacting with Barbara, I just saw their looks and I thought, let's do some close-ups of them that will fit. So it was just a great joy to film this sequence. And you see here, this close-up was also one of the ideas. When she gave this to me, I thought, hey, it will be interesting if we see this in close-up. So we did that. So that's how I usually do these scenes. No storyboard, but a lot of ideas during filming. And it has always worked out beautifully for all the feature films I did so far. Now the song here, I originally wanted to use an original melody for it. A melody I wrote. But then I thought, no, let's use some well-known melody so people can sing along. I don't know if people will actually sing along when they watch this film. When I showed it to a few friends, they actually did. There's one part which is actually specifically sing along. And it's really weird, because you see, again, it's absurd. It's supposed to be some quartet. I thought originally, let's make it a string quartet. 2 violins, a viola, violoncello. But then we decided to give them these different instrument suitcases. So one has a guitar, there are 2 violins, and this other instrument where I don't remember the English name, so please forgive me, but you can certainly see what it is. And now comes the sing-along part. So the English lyrics are just the ones I wrote. German is by me and it's rhyming. French was translated by Maximilian's mother, and I believe Spanish also. So it was great fun. Now comes a sequence where Felix Ziegenbein, the owner of Manufaktur Ziegenbein, where we filmed some scenes, actually appears in the film himself. Because I'm a friend of his and he's a great guy, and I thought if he wants to act in the scene, it would be great. And it was quite spontaneous, and he went in, he went for it. He read his lines, he learned his lines, and we did it. And actually the joke here that you saw, Konstantin always tries to grab Gudrun. This was also spontaneous. And I like the spontaneity on the scene. So I prepared the dialogues for the scene, the props and everything, but when during rehearsal some idea comes along, we just use it. Here is Felix Ziegenbein bringing us the record. And I like this because it goes against all expectations. Now there should be the big finale of the film, and I thought, no, let's make it different. It builds up to this moment of the concert, but no, we get transported back to World War II. And the World War II sequence that's starting now, this shot I actually did on my cell phone and intercut it with the rest of the scene, which worked quite well. And so this World War II scene was originally not supposed... Look, this shot, for example, this pool, please remember it, I'll talk about it in a few moments. So this scene was supposed to be a few German soldiers in a basement. So that was the original idea. Then I was looking for basements, because I thought that I could film easily. I didn't really find a basement that looks like a bunker or something. Then I found Mr. Jörn Windig in Saxony, who collects tanks. And he has this T-34 tank and a big area to drive the tanks around. So I contacted him, and he was very, very, very kind and very generous. He said, just come over, you can film with the tank. I asked him, what about, the fuel and all that? He said, no, I want to support a young artist and his film, so you can do it. So we drove over there with the crew in September 2000 15 after doing the car scene, a few days after doing that. It was a great experience. And I wanted this scene to look as real as possible. I looked up the uniforms a lot. I made sure it's all correctly set in 1945. My character here, this magnetic mine, is a prop made out of cardboard and styrofoam, which I made a few days before filming, and it's attached with this tape to the tank. The original mine would be magnetic. And when the tank blows up, actually they put the engine in idle and put a lot of RPMs on the engine, so it created a lot of smoke. But so that mine was attached with tape, and it actually broke off. But in the film, I picked the take where it actually stuck to it. And we had about 8 hours to film the scene from arriving. So the first 2 hours we got into costume, and Matthias and I scouted the location, and then we filmed very, very quickly. And here Arnold arrives in World War II. And so basically the whole thing with the basement became something bigger. And originally I intended the film to end ambiguous to funny music. So Arnold would leave with the soldiers, and we cut to the photo of Chancellor Schmidt, which he puts on the dead soldier there. And that's Maxime, by the way, Maximilian again, who played the annoyed passenger in the train in the opening, and he appears in all kinds of scenes. So it would pan onto this photo, and then the credits start rolling over the photo set to funny music. But a little bit before filming, I decided, if we have a tank at a great area, let's make the ending more dramatic. Let's make it really a war film. And this scene contains actually no humor. It's a little bit funny when Jane appears with a cell phone. But really I wanted to make it a straight war scene, showing people basically the consequences of all violence, of all these totalitarian regimes, of war in general. And it's very desperate because it's very few people. So it's not a large mass of people with anonymous deaths that seem horrible, but still people cannot really connect to the characters. So here, especially Jane's character, I feel is crucial for making the scene work, because she's stupid but innocent, so to say, her character. So basically, she gets into this horrible situation. So we had 8 hours, so we got in costume and got the costumes dirty by crawling through the mud and so on for 2 hours and scouting the location with Matthias. And then we filmed very quickly. We had to go very quickly because the sun would go down, and we had just 1 day with the tank. And organizing this with the tank was really tough because they cannot see so much from inside the tank. So we told them, you start at this position, you end at this position. And then the tank drove and you had to film it. And it's an old tank. It's not that easy for it to reverse and do the same shot over and over. So it was filmed mostly with one camera by Matthias. Sometimes Sebastian operated a second camera when he's not in the frame. Some shots I did myself. Here, for example, I was just walking and Matthias decided it's beautiful. He started filming and told me it's running. So I just walked there. And it was very intense to do this filming because getting into costume, doing all these things, the guns, they're all deactivated props. They are not working anymore. They're not shooting. And so when his leg gets ripped away by the mine, he put his leg into the mud so it's not visible. Then we took some fake blood and tissue paper and made the tissue paper basically the things on the bottom of his leg. And then when we finished filming the scene, I asked him, what should we do with the tissue paper? And he said, it will dissolve, put it in some puddle of water, So we put it there, and the next day I was walking through the set because I had lost my watch, or I thought I had lost my watch, so I looked for it. I saw the pool of water being reddish from the fake blood, and I filmed that with my cell phone and put it in the beginning. And these red still frames, that was an idea I had very early on when I decided let's make it more dramatic. And this children's song, I took some inspiration from the film Cross of Iron by Sam Peckinpah. So my character here, the whole equipment and uniform, is actually inspired by the main character in Cross of Iron in the Peckinpah film. And the Peckinpah film starts with a montage of archival footage from the war intercut with, scenes of civilian life set to a German children's song. So I decided let's use a different German children's song and actually not use archival footage, but make it this big contrast of the horror you see on screen compared to the innocent children's song. And this last shot, I had the idea when we were on set. In the screenplay I wrote before we drove there, I thought the whole group, they would destroy a tank and then continue, and it's left ambiguous. Then when we were filming this, I thought, no, all should die, and Arnold should just sit there, and it fades over to this ending scene. That was an idea I had for another film that I've not yet realized, which actually ends with a scene which kind of dissolves into the same setting a few years later when there's nothing going on. So kind of everything disappears. And the ending song, Let's Run Away Like Bonnie and Clyde, it started out as a poem I wrote in April 2015. I just wrote it one night out of inspiration. And then when the time for the end credits came, I decided I cannot put funny music over such an ending. You know, I wanted to make it more ambiguous, the ending, but now this is really sad. So I decided to use the theme that I had composed, that had been played a few times in the film, to put it there with the lyrics of this poem I wrote. So I modified the melody slightly to fit the words, and I recorded the song on the piano in one evening, and then I put it over the end credits. And I really like the atmosphere here. And my idea was that film and its message are way more memorable if it ends on such a tone. If it's just funny, 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 and it ends funny, you think, okay, this was funny, and you might leave the theater or, you know, end watching DVD, and yeah, you remember it was pleasant. And that's all. And here it takes you through an emotional journey, and especially I wanted to show war is really horrible, and all these things addressed in the film, totalitarian regimes, taking away people's freedom, doing revolutions, violence and so on, that's not really something funny, you know, because every death is tragic, and we have this small group of soldiers, and it ends with Arnold being all alone. So I thought this emotional impact is very strong, and I really liked that. Yeah, so here all the people who were in the film, you see the tank driver and the tank gunner. And to end this on a lighter note, in the last scene, when they destroy the tank and throw a grenade down the hatch, I actually always thought it was silly in films when they throw a grenade down the hatch. Why should the tank have an open hatch? But they actually told me in combat, a lot of these tanks in World War II had open hatches because it got so hot and so loud inside and so on. So it was actually real. So when we rehearsed this sequence, it's actually in the making of the film. I held the grenade there. This is a grenade prop. It's not a real grenade, obviously. And the gunner, the Peter Meyer who played the gunner, kind of takes it from my hand, and then he tries to use this prop gun to pretend shooting us, and it's just very funny. So that was a really funny moment. And actually, when we got dirty for the scene, we just went through the mud. I didn't want to use makeup. I wanted to make it very realistic. So I recognized we don't get dirty enough in this scene. So actually we started lying in the mud and applying mud to each other, which was very weird. A few people in uniforms lying in the mud, putting mud on each other was very bizarre, a bizarre sight. To the music, you see, some of the music was composed by people who died during the Nazi era. So as a token of respect, as a sign of respect, I wrote it behind their names. You know, for example, Fritz Löhner-Beder and Richard Fall, they both died in Auschwitz. So I'm telling this to make people think about this. You know, these people who wrote this very joyful 1920s music that you just heard, they died in such horrible circumstances. And my goal for the film is also to get people thinking, to get people laughing about the comedy in it, but also get people thinking about the dangers of totalitarian thought. So thank you very much for listening to the audio commentary. I hope you found it interesting. Goodbye.